Hey everyone, tonight we're going somewhere a little darker than usual. Plague, punishment, mud. I'm going to show you what life in the Middle Ages was really like. Forget the castles, forget the shining armor, forget the chivalry that Hollywood sold you. The truth is something else entirely. The truth is, you probably wouldn't last a single day. Before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is for you. I read them all, because tonight's journey is going to take you 700 years into the past. Not to a throne room, not to a banquet hall, but to a one-room hut with a dirt floor and a hole in the roof for smoke, to a village where nearly everyone you will ever meet was born within a mile of where they will die, to a world with no clean water, no reliable medicine, no police, and no promise that you will see tomorrow. You will wake in the cold. You will work until your hands bleed. You will eat the same gray porridge you ate yesterday and the day before that, and you will be grateful for it, because the alternative is nothing at all. There is no comfort here. There is no escape. There is only the village, the field, the church, and the long dark winter pressing down on all of it. And yet, people lived here, millions of them. They were born and they loved, and they buried their children, and they kept going, season after season, for 1,000 years. Tonight, you are one of them. So lie back. Let your breathing slow. Let the modern world fall away from you, piece by piece, the light, the warmth, the certainty that you will wake up safe tomorrow. None of that exists where you are going. Close your eyes. The Middle Ages have already begun. The first thing you notice is the cold. Not the sharp, clean cold of a winter morning, the kind you can step out of and leave behind. This is a cold that has settled into everything, into the dirt floor beneath you, into the damp straw you are lying on, into the very walls of the hut. It is the cold of a house that has never once in its existence been truly warm, and it presses against your skin the moment you drift up out of sleep, before your eyes are even open. You are lying on the floor. There is no bed, not the kind you know. There is only a sack stuffed with straw, flattened by the weight of bodies. Over you lies a rough woolen blanket that smells of smoke and animals and the people who slept under it before you. You are not alone. The whole family sleeps in this one room, mother, father, children, perhaps a grandparent if one has survived that long, perhaps a goat or a pig brought in against the cold of the worst nights. You sleep together because warmth is survival, and a body beside you is a body that keeps you alive until morning. The hut is small. One room, perhaps the size of a modern garage, and not as tall. You can reach up and touch the underside of the thatched roof, blackened by the smoke of 1,000 fires. There is no chimney. The fire burns in a pit in the center of the floor, a low smolder of wood and dried dung, and the smoke rises and curls and gathers under the roof and finds its way out, slowly, through a hole cut in the thatch and through every gap in the walls. The air near the floor is breathable, but the air at the height of your head, when you stand, is thick. People here cough. They cough through their whole lives, and many of them die of it, their lungs blackened by a lifetime of breathing the air of their own homes. The walls are made of woven sticks packed with a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung, wattle and daub, though no one here calls it that. It is simply the wall. It keeps out the worst of the wind and lets in the rest. In summer, it crawls with insects. In winter, it weeps with damp. When the rains come hard, the daub softens and crumbles and must be patched again, and so the walls of your house are a thing you are always repairing, always tending, the way you tend everything here, because nothing is permanent and nothing maintains itself. There is one window. It is not glass. Glass is for churches and for the houses of lords, and you will never in your life own a pane of it. The window is a hole in the wall, closed against the weather by a wooden shutter, and when the shutter is closed, the house is dark even at midday, and when it is open, the cold comes in. You choose between light and warmth every day, and most days you choose warmth, and so you live much of your life in a darkness broken only by the red glow of the fire. You rise. There is no question of staying in bed, no resting, no slow morning. The animals must be tended before anything else. The few you have, the chickens and the pig, and perhaps a cow that is worth more than everything else you own combined. The light is gray at the window, the first light, and you are already behind. In this world, the sun sets the hours, and the sun is merciless. You will rise before it, and you will work until after it sets, and the day in between will be filled entirely with the labor of staying alive. Your clothes are the clothes you slept in. You do not undress at night. It is too cold, and besides, you own little enough that the idea of a separate set of clothes for sleeping would be absurd. You wear a tunic of rough wool, undyed or dyed in the dull browns and grays that are all a peasant can afford, belted at the waist with a strip of leather or a length of cord. Your legs are wrapped in woolen hose or simply bare. On your feet, if you are fortunate, are shoes of soft leather, thin-soled, already worn through, and stuffed with straw or moss for warmth. And these shoes will be soaked through by the middle of the morning, and will not dry until you are asleep again. You step outside. Around you the village is waking in the gray light, other huts like yours, leaning and patched, smoke seeping from their roofs, scattered along a single muddy track that is the only street this place has or will ever have. There is no pavement. There is mud, churned by feet and hooves and cartwheels, frozen hard in winter and bottomless in spring, and you will walk through it every day of your life. Your shoes and the hem of your tunic will be caked with it always. The smell reaches you before you are fully awake. It is the smell of the Middle Ages, and it is everywhere, and you will never escape it, because there is no escaping it. It is wood smoke and animal dung and unwashed bodies and the open pit at the edge of the village, where everything that the village does not want is thrown. It is the smell of the pigs that root through the refuse in the lane. It is the smell of your own clothes, which you have worn for weeks and will wear for weeks more. You do not notice it mostly, because you have never known anything else. But if you could step out of this body and back into your own, the smell alone would stagger you. You look up the lane toward the fields, and beyond them to the manor house where the Lord lives, and beyond that to the church tower, the only stone building for miles, rising over everything. This is your world, the whole of it. You were born in this village, and unless something extraordinary happens, you will die in it, and the farthest you will ever travel is the market town a half-day's walk away, which you will visit a handful of times in your life, and which will seem as vast and strange to you as a foreign country. The cold is in your bones now, your breath hangs in the air. Somewhere A dog is barking, a child is crying, a cart is creaking up the lane, and the day, the long, hard, unending day, has already begun. There is no part of it that belongs to you. You are hungry, you woke up hungry, and you will go to sleep hungry too. The space in between will be a long negotiation with that hunger, the way every day is. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is not much. A piece of bread, dark and dense and hard, torn from a loaf that was baked days ago and has only grown harder since. There is no butter. Butter is precious, saved and traded. There may be a little ale to soften the bread, and there is the porridge, the pottage, which is the true food of the Middle Ages, the meal you will eat at midday and again at night. It forms the foundation of your entire diet. Pottage is whatever you have, boiled together in a single pot that hangs over the fire and is rarely emptied and never truly cleaned. The base is grain, oats, barley, rye, whatever the land gives and the Lord allows you to keep. To it you add what you can: peas, beans, onions, cabbage, leeks, whatever grows in the small garden plot beside your hut, the croft, which is the difference between hunger and starvation for a family like yours. In a good week, there might be a scrap of bacon or the bones of something, boiled for their fat and marrow. In a bad week, it is grain and water and salt, if you have salt. And you eat it because it is hot, and it fills you, and there is nothing else. The pot is never empty because it is never allowed to be. You add to it each day more grain, more water, whatever vegetables have come up, and it simmers on, a continuous thing, the same pottage in some sense for weeks at a time, deepened and changed by each addition. This is not a recipe. It is survival, rendered into food. And it is, in its way, not unhealthy. The grains and the vegetables and the occasional fat give you enough to keep working, most of the time. But it is monotonous beyond anything you can imagine. The same gray, thick, salty mush, day after day after day, for your entire life. You do not eat for pleasure. The idea would not occur to you. You eat to live, and living is hard enough. Bread is the other pillar. It is the most important food in the medieval world, and the kind of bread you eat tells everyone exactly who you are. The Lord eats white bread, fine and pale, made from wheat ground to a smooth flour and sieved clean. You will never eat that bread. Your bread is dark, rye, barley, sometimes mixed with ground peas or beans when the grain runs short, and in the very worst years, the famine years, mixed with things that are not food at all. Ground acorns, bark, the chaff that should have gone to the animals. The grain is often poorly ground, full of grit from the millstones, and over a lifetime of eating it, your teeth are worn flat and your gums bleed. The bread is heavy, sour, and hard. You soak it in your pottage or your ale to make it soft enough to chew, and you are grateful for every mouthful. You do not drink water. This is one of the strange truths of the medieval world, and it is not because they are foolish. It is because they have learned through generations of death that the water makes people sick. They do not know why. They do not know about the tiny organisms in the water that breed in the same ponds and streams where the animals drink and where the village throws its waste. They only know that those who drink water sicken, and those who drink ale do not, or do not as often. And so you drink ale. Everyone drinks ale, men, women, and children, from the morning to the night. This is not the strong beer you know. It is small ale, weak, brewed in the home from barley and whatever else is at hand, low enough in strength that you can drink it all day and keep working. The brewing kills the things in the water that would kill you, though no one understands this. The ale is thick, cloudy, a little sour, and it goes flat and spoils within a few days, so it is brewed constantly, usually by the women of the household, and the alewife who brews well is a person of some standing in the village. A child in this world drinks ale with every meal and may never taste truly clean water. To this world, clean water does not really exist. Meat is rare. You keep animals, but you do not eat them lightly. A pig is a year's worth of meat and fat, slaughtered in the autumn when the cold can preserve it, salted and smoked to last the winter, every part of it used, nothing wasted. A chicken is worth more alive for its eggs than dead. A cow is wealth on legs, kept for milk and for labor, eaten only when it can no longer work or when it dies. The meat you do eat is salted hard or boiled in the pottage for its fat, and fresh meat is a thing of feasts and festivals, not of ordinary days. The Lord hunts the deer and the boar in the forest, and the forest is his, and if you are caught taking so much as a rabbit from it, the punishment is severe, a flogging, a fine you cannot pay, sometimes worse. The animals of the wood belong to the Lord. Your hunger belongs only to you. Salt may look plain, but it is precious, because salt means preservation, and preservation means survival. Without salt, the meat of the autumn slaughter cannot be kept through the winter. The fish cannot be carried inland. The food cannot be saved against the hungry months. Salt is mined and boiled from the sea and traded across vast distances, and it is taxed and controlled and costly, and the peasant uses it carefully, hoarding it, for the salting of the pig in the autumn is one of the great labors of the year, and the salt that makes it possible is dearly bought. The same is true, even more so, of the spices that the wealthy prize, the pepper and the ginger and the cinnamon and the rest, carried from the far side of the world, worth fortunes, used by the great to show their wealth and to disguise the taste of meat that is no longer fresh. You will never taste them. Your seasoning is salt if you have it, along with the herbs of your own garden, the onion and the garlic and the herbs the wise woman grows, and the sharp tang of hunger, which can make even the plainest food welcome. Honey is your only sweetness, for sugar is an exotic medicine here, almost unknown, sold by the apothecary in tiny amounts at great price. Honey comes from the hives that the village keeps, and it is precious too, used sparingly, a treat for the festival days, a medicine as much as a food. The beeswax is as valuable as the honey, perhaps more, for the candles of pure wax that burn clean and bright are luxuries of the church and the great house, and your light is the foul-smelling tallow and the guttering rush, never the clean flame of the wax candle. The bees are tended with care, for the hive is wealth, the honey and the wax both, and the keeping of bees is an old and valued skill. And through all of it runs one simple grinding fact. There is never quite enough, not quite enough food, not quite enough variety, not enough certainty that the food will last. You are not, most years, starving. But you are rarely full in the way you would understand fullness, rarely free of the low, constant awareness of the stores and how long they must last, and whether they will stretch to the spring. Food is not pleasure here. Food is survival, counted and measured and worried over. And the abundance you take for granted, the casual plenty of one ordinary day in your own world, would seem to the medieval peasant a wealth beyond the dreams of kings. The seasons rule your stomach. In late summer and early autumn, after the harvest, there is enough. Grain in the store, vegetables in the croft, a pig fattened and ready. This is the closest you come to plenty, and even this is not much. Through the winter the store dwindles. By the late winter and the early spring, the hungry gap, the time before the new crops come in and after the old ones are gone, you are eating the last of everything, scraping the bottom of the grain store, watching the children grow thin. People die in the hungry gap, the old, the young, the already weak. They do not starve dramatically. They simply fade, weakened by hunger, into easy victims for the first fever that passes through the village. And then the spring comes, and the green returns, and you plant again, and the whole cycle begins once more, the same cycle your parents lived and their parents before them, the long turning of hunger and harvest. That is the rhythm of every life here. You are thirsty in a way that never quite goes away, and the water that surrounds you, the stream at the bottom of the village, the pond, the well if you are fortunate enough to have one, is slowly killing the people who drink it. This is the great invisible danger of the medieval world, not the sword, not even the plague in most years. It is the water, the filth, and the things that breed in both, things no one can see and no one understands. The village draws its water from the stream, and into that same stream, upstream and down, runs everything the village discards, the waste of the animals, the waste of the people, the runoff from the midden heaps where the refuse rots. The well, if there is one, sits in ground soaked with the same contamination, and so the water that you must have to live is the same water that carries dysentery and typhoid, and a dozen other diseases that have no names here, only symptoms, only the steady toll of the sick and the dying. Dysentery is so common it is simply a fact of life. The bloody flux, they call it. It comes in the warm months when the filth ferments and the flies breed, and it moves through the village taking the weak, the infants above all, who die of it in numbers that would be unthinkable to you. A third or more of all children dead before they reach the age of 5. You have grown up with this. You have seen siblings die. Your mother has buried children. It is not that medieval people do not grieve. They grieve terribly. They love their children as fiercely as any parent ever has. But they expect to lose some of them. They are not surprised when it happens. And that expectation is one of the heaviest things about this world. The assumption, woven into every birth, that not all of these children will live. There is medicine of a kind. There is the wise woman of the village who knows the herbs, the willow bark that eases pain, the yarrow that staunches bleeding, the chamomile and the mint, and the dozens of plants whose uses have been passed down through generations of women. Some of it works, some of it genuinely helps. The wise woman is the closest thing to a doctor that most people here will ever see. She is valued for it, and also feared a little, because knowledge in a woman is a dangerous thing in this world. The line between healer and witch is thin, and in a single bad season it can be crossed. But learned medicine, the medicine of the universities and monasteries, is built on foundations that are almost entirely wrong. The body, they believe, is governed by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. And illness is an imbalance among them. To cure you, the physician seeks to restore the balance, and the chief tool for this is bloodletting. They will open a vein and let your blood run into a bowl, weakening you precisely when you most need strength. They will purge you, dose you with things that make you vomit, blister your skin, apply leeches. For most of what ails you, the medieval physician's treatment is more dangerous than the disease, and the physician himself is a luxury you will never afford. He is for the wealthy. For you there is the wise woman, the herbs, the prayers, and the slow mercy or cruelty of the disease running its course. When the pain is bad, and pain is a constant companion here, the pain of rotting teeth, of wounds that will not heal, of joints worn down by labor, of childbirth that maims and kills, there is little to be done. There is willow bark, which contains a compound that will one day be known as aspirin, and there is alcohol, and there is the poppy, if anyone has it, which is rare. Mostly there is endurance. The medieval body endures pain that would put you in a hospital, endures it daily, endures it because there is no alternative. And the capacity for endurance is perhaps the single greatest difference between the people of this world and the people of yours. Your teeth are a particular misery. You might think, with no sugar in the diet, for sugar is an exotic luxury, almost unknown, that medieval teeth would be sound, and in a way they are. There is little decay of the kind that plagues the modern mouth. But the bread, full of grit from the millstones, wears the teeth down to the nerve over a lifetime, flattening them, cracking them, exposing them to abscess and rot. And when a tooth goes bad, there is no dentist, only the barber, who is also the surgeon, who will pull the tooth with iron pincers, with no relief from the agony beyond a strong drink and strong hands to hold you down. An abscessed tooth can kill, the infection spreading into the blood, the jaw, the brain. And people do die of their teeth here, in screaming, swollen agony, for want of anything that could save them. Childbirth is the shadow that falls over every woman's life. To be a woman in the medieval world is to face, every time you are with child, a real and serious chance of dying. There are no doctors at the birth. Childbirth is women's work, attended by the midwife and the women of the family. And the midwife's skill is real, born of experience, but she has no answer for the births that go wrong. The breech birth, the bleeding that will not stop, the fever that comes in the days after, the infection that the unwashed hands and the unclean world drive into the body at its most vulnerable. Women die in childbirth in numbers that shape the whole society. Men outliving wife after wife, children raised by stepmothers, the act of bringing life into the world shadowed always by the nearness of death. And the child that survives the birth must then survive the first 5 years, the most dangerous years, the years of the flux and the fever and the hungry gap, and so many of them do not. You live in this world always close to death. It is not morbid. It is not dwelt upon. It is simply the condition of existence, that the body is fragile, that the world is full of dangers you cannot see, that the line between health and the grave is thin and easily crossed, and that there is very little, in the end, that anyone can do about it, but pray and endure and keep going. The work begins at first light and does not end until the light is gone, and it is the kind of work that breaks bodies, bends backs, ruins joints, hardens hands into something like horn. And it is the work you were born to, and the work you will die doing. You are a peasant. More than that, you are likely a serf, which is something worse, something closer to the land than to freedom. You do not own the land you work. The land belongs to the Lord of the manor, who holds it from a greater Lord, who holds it from a greater Lord still, up and up the long chain of obligation to the King himself. You work the land, and in exchange for the right to work a small portion of it for yourself, you owe the Lord labor and goods and a portion of everything you grow, and you cannot leave. That is the heart of serfdom. You cannot leave. You are bound to this manor, this village, this stretch of earth, as surely as the trees are. You cannot marry without the Lord's permission. You cannot move to the town without it. Your children will be born into the same bondage, will owe the same labor, will work the same fields, generation after generation, the chain unbroken. The land is farmed in great open fields, divided into strips, and your strips are scattered among everyone else's. A strip here, a strip there, so that good land and poor land are shared out among the village, and no one has all of one or all of the other. You farm in common, the whole village together, following the same rhythm, the same decisions made at the manor court about when to plow, and when to plant, and when to harvest. There is no fence around your land, no private field of your own. There is only your scattered handful of strips in the great open expanse, and the obligation to work them, and the obligation, before you can work them, to work the Lord's. This is labor service, the boon work, the days you owe the Lord each week, and the extra days you owe at the busy seasons. Before you tend your own strips, you plow his. You sow his fields, weed them, harvest them, carry his grain to his barn. At haymaking and at harvest, the times when the whole year's survival hangs on getting the crop in before the weather turns, you owe him still more, and your own crop waits while you bring in his. It is unpaid. It is owed. It is the rent you pay for the right to exist on his land, and there is no escaping it, and the Lord's steward and the reeve are always watching to see that you give your full measure. The tools you work with are simple and brutal. The plow, if your village is fortunate enough to have a good one, is a heavy thing of wood and iron, drawn by oxen. Slow, patient, enormously strong oxen. It takes a team of them, 6 or 8, to pull the plow through heavy clay soil. No single family owns a full team, so the oxen are shared, pooled among several households. It is another thread in the web of obligation that binds the village together. You walk behind the plow through the cold spring mud, guiding it, while another drives the oxen, and the work is brutally hard and brutally slow, and a single field takes days. You sow by hand, scattering seed from a basket as you walk. Much of it is lost, to the birds, to the rot, to the poor soil, so that the yield is pitiful by any standard you know. Plant a measure of grain and harvest, perhaps 3 or 4 measures back, of which one must be kept for next year's seed, leaving little enough to live on and to render to the Lord. You weed the growing crop by hand, bent double for hours, for days. You harvest with the sickle and the scythe, swinging through the standing grain under the late summer sun, and the harvest is the great labor of the year, the whole village in the fields from dawn to dark, racing the weather, because a crop ruined by rain in the field is a winter of starvation. And there is no rest in the other seasons either, because the work simply changes. In winter you thresh the grain, beating it with flails on the barn floor to separate the seed from the straw, breathing the dust, working in the cold. You mend what is broken, the tools, the fences, the walls of your hut. You tend the animals, who must be fed through the winter from the hay you cut and stored in the summer. And if the hay runs short, the animals starve, and you must decide which to kill and which to try to keep alive until spring. You cut wood, haul water, repair the thatch. There is the Lord's mill, where you must take your grain to be ground, and where you must pay for the grinding a portion taken by the miller who is hated for it across all of medieval Europe, the miller with his thumb on the scale. There is the Lord's oven sometimes, where you must bake your bread and pay for the baking. Everything you do, the Lord takes his share of. Every loaf, every measure of grain, every animal, every act of labor. Your body pays the price of all this. By 30 you are old. Your back is bent from the plow and the sickle. Your hands are ruined. Your joints ache in the wet, which is always. If you live to 40, you are among the elders of the village, and you will not look as a person of 40 looks to you now. You will look ancient, worn down, used up, your face lined and your remaining teeth gone, and your body failing. Most do not reach old age. The average is dragged down by all the children who die. But even setting them aside, a life here is short and hard, and the work is the thing that makes it so, the endless, grinding, unrewarded work that fills every day from the first light to the last, and asks of your body more than any body was made to give. And yet there is a kind of dignity in it, and a kind of community. You do not work alone. The whole village works together, suffers together, survives together. At the harvest there is exhaustion, but also a fierce shared purpose. When the work is done, there are the festivals, the saints' days, the rough holidays scattered through the year when the labor stops, and there is ale and music and dancing on the green. The medieval peasant is not simply a beast of burden, not in his own eyes. He is part of something, a village, a community, a way of life that has endured for centuries and will endure for centuries more. But the work is the spine of it all, the work that never ends, and it will be there waiting for you tomorrow morning before the sun is even up. Above you, always, is the Lord. You may live your whole life without exchanging a single word with him. He is not a man to you so much as a power, a presence, the figure at the top of the world whose will shapes every part of your existence. He lives in the manor house, not a great castle most likely, but a substantial house of timber or stone, large and warm and full of things you will never own, with a hall where he holds his court and rooms where he and his family live in a comfort you cannot imagine. He owns the land, he owns the mill and the oven, and in a sense the law takes very seriously. He owns you. The Lord's power over you is near total. He holds the manor court, where the disputes of the village are settled, and where you are fined for your failings, for not giving full labor service, for letting your animals stray into his crop, for marrying off your daughter without his leave, for the 1,000 small infractions that the court exists to punish and profit from. The fines go to him. The court is not justice as you would understand it. It is, in large part, another way for the Lord to extract wealth from those beneath him, and the steward who runs it on his behalf is a figure of dread, with his rolls and his records and his memory of every obligation owed. But a Lord owes things too, and this is the bargain at the heart of the whole arrangement, the thing that makes it more than simple slavery. The Lord owes you protection. In a violent and lawless age, when raiders and rival lords and simple bandits might descend on a village and take everything, the Lord and his men are the wall between you and that chaos. He owes you justice of a rough kind. He owes you the use of the land that keeps you alive. The relationship is brutally unequal, but it is still a relationship with obligations running both ways. This is the structure medieval people call by no single name, but later ages will call feudalism. The great pyramid of obligation, peasant to lord, lord to greater lord, and greater lord to king. Every level owes service upward and protection downward. The whole of society is bound together by these vertical chains of duty. Below the lord, but above you, there are others. There is the steward who runs the manor's business. There is the reeve, who is often chosen from among the peasants themselves, a man set to oversee his neighbors, caught between the lord's demands and the village's resentment. There is the bailiff. There is the miller and the smith and the others whose skills set them a little apart. And there is the priest, who belongs to a different hierarchy altogether, but who lives among you and shapes your life as surely as the Lord does. Your place in all of this is fixed. This is perhaps the hardest thing for a modern mind to grasp about the medieval world. Not the hardship, not the filth, but the fixedness. You are born into your station, and you will die in it. There is no ladder to climb, no dream of betterment, no expectation that your children will have more than you had. The son of a peasant is a peasant. The son of a lord is a lord. This is not seen as injustice. It is seen as the natural order of the world, ordained by God, who has placed each person in the station meant for them by the divine plan. The thinkers of the age will tell you there are three orders of society: those who pray, those who fight, and those who work. The clergy pray for everyone's souls. The nobles fight to protect everyone. And you work to feed them both. Each order has its place, and the places do not change, and to wish to change them is almost a sin. And yet there are cracks in this fixed world, and through them, occasionally, a person can climb. The town is one such crack. If a serf can flee to a chartered town and live there, unclaimed for a year and a day, he becomes free. Town air makes you free, the saying goes, and the growing towns of the age are full of people who have done exactly this, escaped the land and the Lord, and remade themselves as craftsmen and traders. The church is another crack. A clever boy of low birth, if he can get an education, can rise through the clergy to heights of power and wealth that no peasant could otherwise dream of. These paths are narrow and difficult, and most people never take them. But they exist, and they are part of why the medieval world, for all its rigidity, is not quite as frozen as it first appears. For you, though, in this village, on this manor, the structure is everything. You know your place. You know to whom you owe what. You know to bow your head when the Lord rides past, to give the priest his due, to render your labor and your goods and your obedience upward, and to expect in return the rough protection and rough justice that flows back down. It is not freedom. It is very far from freedom. But it is order, and in a world as dangerous as this one, order is not nothing. The chaos that waits outside the structure, the famine, the violence, the lawless dark, is worse than any lord. And so you take your place in the great pyramid, near the very bottom of it, holding up everything above you with the labor of your hands, and you do not question it. Questioning it has never once occurred to you, because this is simply the shape of the world, the only shape it has ever had, or as far as you know, ever could. The church is the center of everything. It is the only stone building you will ever spend time in, rising over the huts of the village like something from another world, permanent where everything else is temporary, beautiful where everything else is mean. And the faith it houses is not a part of your life. It is the whole frame of it, the thing inside which everything else happens, as inescapable and as total as the sky. You are a Christian. There is nothing else to be. The possibility of unbelief does not exist in your world the way it might in the modern one. God is not a question, but a fact, as real as the harvest, as the cold, as death itself. The church teaches you that this life is a brief and painful passage, a trial, and that what matters is the life that comes after. Heaven, if you are saved, and hell, that pit of eternal fire and torment, if you are damned. And the stakes of that judgment are infinite. A few decades of suffering here against an eternity of bliss or an eternity of agony. Set against that, the hardness of your life is almost a comfort. Suffering is to be expected. Suffering is the lot of fallen humanity, and suffering borne well is a path toward salvation. The rhythm of your life is the rhythm of the church. The bells of the church tower mark the hours. They call you to prayer and to Mass. The days of the week and the seasons of the year are shaped by the calendar of the faith. There are the long fasts of Lent and Advent, when meat is forbidden, and the diet, already poor, becomes poorer still. There are the feast days of the saints, scattered through the year. Your holidays, your rare days of rest and celebration. And there are the great festivals of Christmas and Easter, the high points of the whole year. You count time not in dates, but in saints' days, in the feasts and fasts of the church. And the structure of the sacred year is the structure of your life. You go to Mass, and the Mass is in Latin, which you do not understand. Almost no one in the village understands it. Latin is the language of the church and the learned, and you speak only the rough local tongue. So the words of the Mass wash over you as sound, as ritual, as something powerful and mysterious happening at the altar, the priest with his back to you, performing the great miracle of the faith, the bread and the wine becoming the body and blood of Christ. You do not need to understand the words. The church does not particularly want you to understand the words. What matters is that you are present, that you partake, that you are within the body of the faithful and not outside it, because outside it there is only damnation. The church building itself teaches you, because the words cannot. The walls are painted, bright, vivid paintings, for the medieval church is not the bare stone you might picture, but a riot of color, every surface telling a story. There is Christ in glory. There are the saints and their sufferings. And there, above the door or across the western wall, where you cannot miss it as you leave, is the last judgment, the doom they call it. Christ is enthroned. The dead rise from their graves. The saved ascend into the light, and the damned are dragged down by gleeful demons into the mouth of hell, where they will burn, be devoured, and burn again forever. This is not abstract to you. This is real as anything, and the painted demons and the painted fire are a warning you carry with you out of the church and back to your life. Be good, be faithful, obey, or this is what waits. The priest is your guide through all of this, and he is a man much like you. Often a local man of peasant stock himself, with just enough Latin to perform the Mass and just enough learning to set him above his flock. He is not a distant figure. He works a glebe, a portion of land, much as you do. He may keep a woman despite the rules, and father children despite the rules, and drink and quarrel like any other man. The village priest is not a saint and is not expected to be one, but he holds in his hands the keys to your salvation. He baptizes your children, binding them into the faith and saving them, should they die, from the limbo that awaits the unbaptized. He hears your confession and grants you absolution. He marries you. And when you are dying, it is he who comes to give you the last rites, to anoint you and hear your final confession and send your soul on its way, shriven and prepared, and to die without him, to die unconfessed and unanointed, is a horror, because it means dying with your sins upon you and facing the judgment unprepared. The church is also immensely powerful and immensely wealthy, and this is not a contradiction to the medieval mind. The church owns vast lands. It collects the tithe, a tenth of everything you produce, owed to the church as surely as the labor you owe the Lord, so that you are taxed twice by the Lord and by God. And the tithe barn, where the church's grain is stored, is often the largest building in the parish after the church itself. The great monasteries are centers of wealth and power and learning, the abbots as mighty as any lord. The bishops are princes. The Pope in Rome is a figure of authority that crosses all borders, who can humble kings. The wealth of the church sits strangely beside the poverty of Christ that it preaches. And there are those in this age who notice the contradiction and speak against it, and some of them are called reformers and some are called heretics. And the line between the two can mean the difference between a saint and a person burned at the stake. For you, though, the faith is not about the wealth of bishops or the politics of popes. It is intimate and total. It is the prayer you say over the fire. It is the saint whose name you bear and whose protection you ask. It is the holy water and the relics and the pilgrimage you might one day make, if you are fortunate, to some shrine where a saint's bones work miracles. It is the fear of hell and the hope of heaven, woven into every hour. It is the meaning of your suffering and the promise that the suffering is not the end. In a life this hard, in a world this dark, the faith is the light that makes it bearable. It promises that the Lord, the steward, the hunger, and the cold are not the whole of the story. It promises that there is a justice coming that this world does not provide. It promises that the last shall be first, and that even you, a serf in a hut at the bottom of the world, have a soul as precious to God as the king's. It is, in the end, perhaps the most precious thing you own, the only thing the Lord cannot take, and you hold to it through everything. Without it, there would be nothing at all. A half-day's walk from your village, there is a town, and the town is another world. You go there rarely, a handful of times a year perhaps, to the great market, or once in a lifetime to the fair that draws people from across the whole region. The journey itself is an event. It is undertaken in company, for safety, for the roads are bad and the roads are dangerous, rutted tracks that turn to bog in the wet, haunted by robbers in the lonely stretches. And a person traveling alone with goods or coin is inviting trouble. But you go, because the town is where the things you cannot make or grow can be had, and where the things you have can be sold or traded, and because the town, for all its strangeness, is a marvel that draws you back. It is bigger than anything in your daily life, though small by the measure of any city you have known. A few thousand souls, perhaps, packed behind walls, the houses crowded together and built upward, 2 and 3 stories, leaning over the narrow streets until the upper floors nearly touch above your head, and the sky is a thin strip far overhead. The streets are mud and worse, the filth of the packed-in people running down the open channel in the center, the smell thicker even than the villages, the press of bodies and animals, and trade overwhelming to one who has known only the open fields. But it is alive in a way the village is not, loud, busy, crowded with strangers, faces you have never seen and will never see again, a churn of humanity that has no equal in your quiet rural world. The market is the heart of it. On market day, the square fills with stalls, and the goods spread across them are a wonder. There is cloth dyed in colors you cannot afford, reds and blues and greens that make the dull browns of your own clothing seem like mud beside jewels. There are pots, knives, and tools from the smith and the potter. There are spices from impossibly far away, pepper, ginger, cinnamon, worth more than their weight in silver, carried from the other side of the world through hands beyond counting, only to end up here, on a stall, in a town you thought was the edge of everything. There is the baker, the butcher, the fishmonger with his catch from the rivers and the coast. There is the seller of trinkets and the seller of relics, the holy bones and fragments that promise healing and salvation, real or false, no one quite able to tell. The market is policed after a fashion. There are rules. Weights and measures are checked. The cheat is punished. The baker who shorts his loaves may be dragged through the streets. But it is also a place where a country person like you can be fleeced by sharper eyes, so you guard your few coins and your wits and try not to look as lost as you feel. The town is full of craftsmen, organized in a way the village has nothing like. There are the guilds, the brotherhoods of those who practice the same trade, the weavers, the dyers, the smiths, the masons, and dozens of others. Each guild controls its craft, sets its standards, and trains its members through the long years of apprenticeship and journeyman's work that lead for the fortunate few to the rank of master with a workshop of his own. The guild is a power in the town, a source of order and pride and mutual support, looking after its own, the sick member, and the widow and the orphan, burying its dead with honor, marching together in the great processions on the feast days. To belong to a guild is to have a place, a security, an identity that the masterless poor of the town can only envy. And the craftsmen produce things of real beauty and skill. The cloth, the metalwork, the carving, the great cathedrals raised over generations by masons whose names are mostly lost, but whose work still stands. The town is where the skill of the age gathers, where things are made that the village could never make. And the town is free, or at least freer, in a way that strikes you each time you visit. The serf is bound to the land, but the townsman is not. The towns hold charters, won or bought from the lords and kings, that grant them liberties, the right to govern their own affairs, to hold their own courts, to be free of many of the obligations that bind the countryside. Town air makes you free, the saying goes. And it is true in a hard and literal sense. A serf who flees to a chartered town and lives there unclaimed for a year and a day becomes a free man, the lord's hold over him broken. The towns are full of such people, escaped from the land, remade as craftsmen and traders and laborers, and the freedom of the towns is a crack in the great frozen order of the medieval world, a place where a man can rise by his own effort and his own skill in a way the village can never allow. You feel it when you are there, the different air of the place, the possibility in it. Then you walk back to your village, half a day along the bad road, back to the Lord in the field and the fixed life you were born to, and the town recedes behind you like a dream of another world, glimpsed and then left, the world you will never live in, the freedom that was never meant for you. You are dirty, and you smell, and so does everyone you have ever known, and you do not think about it, because there is nothing to think about. This is simply what a human being is, a body that labors and sweats and is rarely washed, wrapped in wool that is rarely changed, living close to animals and close to filth. The picture you might have of the medieval world as a place of complete and constant squalor is not quite fair. People here are not entirely indifferent to cleanliness. They wash their hands and faces. They value clean linen, those who can afford linen at all, because the linen worn next to the skin can be changed and laundered, while the heavy wool outer garments cannot. In the towns there are bathhouses, the stews, where those with a little money can soak in hot water, though these are as much places of pleasure and ill repute as of hygiene, and the church regards them with suspicion. Cleanliness, where it exists, is mostly a thing of the surface. Clean hands, clean linen, a washed face, laid over a deeper and inescapable dirtiness that no one in this world has the means to truly conquer. For you, a full immersion in clean, warm water is a rare thing, perhaps a few times a year, perhaps less. To heat enough water to bathe in is a labor and an expense, the fuel, the time, the single great pot, and the water, once heated, is shared, the whole family bathing in turn in the same tub. The cleanest and most important first, the dirtiest last, the water growing colder and fouler with each body. More often you wash in cold water, or not at all, and you live in a layer of your own grime that you have long since stopped noticing. Your clothes are wool, and wool is not washed. To wash it is to ruin it, to make it shrink and felt. So the woolen tunic and hose you wear are worn until they fall apart, brushed clean of the worst of the mud, but never truly laundered. The linen beneath, if you have it, is washed whenever it can be, beaten clean in the stream with ash or lye, but linen is precious, and you may have only a single shift to your name. Your clothes are home to lice and fleas, as everyone's are, and the itch of them is a constant low companion, and the picking of them from the seams a regular task, done by firelight, a mother delousing her children the way the animals groom one another. There is no shame in it. Everyone has them. The lice and the fleas move from body to body and from house to house, and they carry diseases that no one connects to them. And they are simply part of what it is to have a body in this world. Your hair is long and rarely cut and full of grease and worse. The women cover their hair, married women especially, beneath a wimple or a kerchief, both for modesty and because a covered head is a managed head. The men wear their hair to the shoulder or thereabouts, and beards are common, and all of it is home to the same small creatures that live in the clothes. There are combs, fine-toothed combs, made of bone or wood, whose purpose is as much to drag the lice and their eggs from the hair as to arrange it. and the comb is one of the few personal possessions a peasant might own and value. The teeth, again, are a misery, and the breath of the medieval world is foul. Rotting teeth, poor food, no means of cleaning the mouth beyond a rinse and a rub with a cloth or a frayed twig. You chew herbs sometimes to mask it, mint or parsley, but the underlying state of the medieval mouth is grim, and you live with it as you live with everything, because there is no alternative. And the village around you is filthy in a way that compounds all of this. There is no sanitation, no drains, no system for carrying away the waste of people and animals. There is the midden, the heap of refuse and dung at the edge of each croft, which is at least useful, spread on the fields as fertilizer when it has rotted down. There is the pit or corner that serves as a privy, or simply the open ground. The animals foul the lane freely. The pigs root through the rubbish. In the wet, all of it turns to a stinking mire underfoot, and in the dry it bakes and stinks differently, and the flies rise from it in clouds in the summer, and settle on the food and the faces of the children, and carry the flux from the filth to the mouth. The connection between filth and disease is invisible to you. You know only that summer is the sickly season, that the warm months bring the flux and the fevers, and you do not know that it is the flies and the foulness that bring them. And so there is nothing you can do but endure, and bury your dead, and wait for the cold to come and end the dying for another year. In the towns it is worse, paradoxically. The filth concentrated, the people packed together, the waste thrown into the street to be carried off by the rain and the pigs and the rakers, if there are rakers, the open sewers running down the center of the lanes, the stench so thick that the towns can be smelled from far off across the fields. The great towns pass laws against the filth, order the streets cleaned, forbid the throwing of waste from windows, and the laws are broken as fast as they are made, because there is simply nowhere for the waste to go and no understanding of why it matters beyond the smell. You do not, of course, experience any of this as squalor. You have never known anything else. The smell that would overwhelm a visitor from another age is, to you, simply the smell of the world, of home, of life. The dirt is the medium you live in. The lice are companions you have had since birth. You are not ashamed, and you are not disgusted, because shame and disgust require a standard of cleanliness that does not exist in your world, and that you have never imagined. You are a body in the medieval world, and the medieval world is dirty, and you are part of it, down to the grime worked permanently into the creases of your hands. The work of the village is shared between men and women, and the woman's share is, if anything, the heavier, because it never stops. If you are a woman in this world, your life is labor from childhood to the grave, and the labor is endless, because it is the labor of keeping a household alive. You rise first, and you sleep last. You tend the fire, which must never be allowed to die, for to relight it from cold is a long and difficult task, and a fire kept burning is a fire that need not be made anew each morning. You cook the pottage and bake the bread, and brew the ale, the brewing above all, for the alewife's skill keeps the whole family in safe drink. And a good brew is a thing of pride and even sometimes of small profit, the surplus sold to neighbors. You keep the croft, the garden plot beside the hut, where the vegetables grow that are the difference between bare grain and something like nourishment. You tend the chickens and the pig and milk the cow if there is one, and you make the butter and the cheese that the family eats or sells. You spin. Always you are spinning, the distaff and the spindle never far from your hand, for the wool must be turned into thread, and the thread into cloth. And a woman's spinning is so constant a thing that the unmarried woman is called by it, the spinster, the spinner, the one whose hands are always at the wool. And on top of all of this, at the busy seasons, you work the fields beside the men, weeding, haymaking, harvesting, the harvest demanding every hand the village has. The women in the fields with the men from dawn to dark, and then home to the cooking, and the children, and the animals when the field work is done. The woman's day has no edges, no clean end to her labor, because the household is always there and always needing, and she is the one who holds it together. And the holding is a labor without rest from the day she is old enough to work until the day she is too old or too dead to work any longer. And she bears the children, and childbirth, as we have seen, is the shadow over every woman's life, the real chance of death at every birth, and the births coming again and again, a woman pregnant or nursing through most of her childbearing years, child after child, and burying so many of them. The children that live are working children, set to tasks as soon as they can perform them. The small ones scaring birds from the crops, gathering firewood and kindling, watching the geese and the pigs, the older ones taking on the full labor of adults, well before they would be considered adults in your own world. There is little of childhood as you know it, little of play, and none of school for most, the child a small worker as soon as it is able, its labor needed, its hands another pair the household cannot do without. A child of 7 has duties. A child of 10 works almost like an adult. The notion that childhood should be a protected time of innocence and learning is not one this world can afford, and the children grow up fast and hard, learning their parents' work by doing it, the daughter beside her mother at the fire and the spindle, the son beside his father at the plow, the next generation shaped exactly to the mold of the last. Marriage, when it comes, is as much a matter of the household and the land as of the heart. Among the peasantry it is not arranged as coldly as it is among the great families, where marriages are alliances of property and power, decided by parents with no thought for the feelings of the young. A peasant has more freedom to choose, but only within the narrow circle of the village, and only with the Lord's permission. That permission must be bought. The Lord takes his fee for the marriage of a serf, as he takes his fee for everything. But the marriage is still, at bottom, an economic partnership, the joining of 2 pairs of working hands, the founding of a household that must feed itself from the land, and love, where it grows within that frame, or alongside it, or sometimes not at all. The woman passes from her father's authority into her husband's. She has few rights of her own that the law will defend. She can be beaten by her husband within limits law and custom permit, and her labor and her body and her children are, in the eyes of the age, very largely his. And yet within the household she rules her own domain, the work of the house and the croft, and the dairy hers to command, and the partnership of a good marriage is a real thing. 2 people bound together against a hard world, depending on each other utterly, surviving because together they can do what neither could do alone. The old, those few who reach old age, are cared for by their children because there is no other care. There is no provision for the aged except the family. A son or daughter takes in the worn-out parent who can no longer work, finds a place for them by the fire, and gives them a share of the pottage. In exchange, perhaps, they watch the smallest children and do whatever small tasks their old hands can still manage. To grow old without children, or with children dead or gone, is to face a desperate end. You become dependent on the thin charity of the church and the neighbors. And old age, when it comes at all, is rarely gentle. The body is broken by a lifetime of labor. The place at the fire is earned by a lifetime of work and held only so long as the family can spare the food. There is justice in the medieval world. But it is not justice as you would know it, and it is swift, and it is brutal, and it is meant above all to be seen. You live day to day under several different kinds of law at once. There is the manor court, the Lord's court, which handles the small business of village life, the disputes over strips of land and strayed animals, the failures to render service, the petty quarrels and trespasses, and which punishes mostly through fines, the fines flowing into the Lord's purse. There is the church court, which claims authority over matters of sin and morality and the souls of men, over marriage and adultery and blasphemy and the conduct of the clergy, and which can impose penances, public humiliations, excommunication. And above these there is the king's law, the common law taking shape in this age, which claims the great crimes, the felonies, the killings and the robberies and the offenses against the king's peace, and which punishes them with a severity that is difficult to overstate. For serious crimes, the medieval world has little use for imprisonment. A prison is a place to hold a person until trial, not a punishment in itself. The long sentence, the years behind bars, is largely a thing of later ages. Medieval punishment is bodily, and it is public. It is the lash, the brand, the loss of a hand or an ear, the stocks and the pillory, and for the worst crimes, death. Death by hanging, most commonly, the gallows standing at the edge of the town or the crossroads as a permanent reminder, the bodies sometimes left to hang and rot as a warning to all who pass. The public nature of it is the point. Punishment is theater, a lesson delivered to the whole community at once. The thief is not quietly removed. The thief is flogged through the streets or set in the stocks where the village can pelt him with filth and abuse, or branded so that he carries the mark of his crime on his body forever, visible to all. The scold, the woman accused of a sharp and disruptive tongue, is set in the ducking stool and plunged into the pond, or made to wear the bridle, an iron cage about the head with a bit that holds down the tongue, and paraded through the town. The baker who cheats on the weight of his bread is dragged through the streets with the offending loaf hung about his neck. Shame is a weapon deliberately wielded, and in a world this small, where everyone knows everyone and reputation is everything, the shame can be a punishment as heavy as any pain. And the pain, when it comes, is terrible. The methods of execution for the worst offenses are designed for maximum suffering and maximum spectacle. The traitor is not merely killed, but hanged, drawn, and quartered, hanged until nearly dead, then cut down, disemboweled while still living, and finally cut into pieces, the parts displayed at the gates of cities as a warning. The heretic is burned alive at the stake, the fire a symbol of the hellfire that awaits the damned soul, the burning meant to purify even as it destroys. These extreme punishments are not common. Most crimes meet the rope or the lash or the brand, but they exist, and they are public, and the crowds gather to watch them, and the watching is itself part of the order of things. The community gathered to witness the wages of sin. Trial itself is a strange and often terrifying business. The older forms of justice, fading in this age but not yet gone, included the ordeal. The accused made to carry a red-hot iron, or plunge a hand into boiling water, or be bound and cast into a pond, and the verdict read from the result. If the burned hand healed cleanly, God had declared you innocent. If it festered, guilty. If you sank in the water, you were innocent, the pure water accepting you. If you floated, the water was rejecting you, and you were guilty, and saved from drowning only to face the punishment for your proven crime. The ordeal rested on the belief that God would intervene to protect the innocent. The Church withdrew its support from it in this age, and slowly it gave way to the jury, to the verdict of the community. But the memory of it, and sometimes the practice of it, lingered. The casting of a suspected witch into the water to see whether she would sink or float would echo down the centuries. For you, a peasant, the law is something to be feared more than trusted. Justice favors the powerful, as it does in most times and places, but here the imbalance is stark and unhidden. The Lord's court serves the Lord. The fines fall on you and flow to him. A poor man accused has little defense and few rights as you would understand rights. No lawyer, no presumption of innocence in the modern sense, no protection from a justice that is arbitrary and personal and bent toward the interests of those above you. And the punishments fall hardest on the poor, who steal because they are hungry and hang for the stealing of very little. A few pennies worth of goods enough to put a noose around a neck in some times and places. The law protecting property with a ferocity that does not extend to protecting the people who have none. And beneath the formal law, there is the rough justice of the village itself, the community policing its own. There is the hue and cry, the duty of all to give chase when a crime is committed, the whole village turning out to run down the thief or the killer. There are the customs and shaming rituals by which the village punishes those who break its unwritten rules. There is the charivari, the rough music, the mob that gathers outside the house of the wife-beater, the adulterer, or the man who has married a woman far too young or too old. They bang pots and jeer through the night. It is a punishment with no court and no law behind it, only the will of the community. And in a place this small, that will is a power as real as any lord's. This is the order you live within, an order held together by fear as much as by anything, by the visible, bodily, public consequences of stepping out of line. It is harsh beyond your imagining, and it is also, in its way, what stands between the village and chaos. The violence of the law is a bargain. Submit to it and be protected by it, however roughly. Defy it and face the full weight of its cruelty. And so you keep your head down, and you stay within the lines, and you watch the punishments in the square with the rest of the village, and you take the lesson they are meant to teach. And you are careful, always careful, never to give them reason to make a lesson of you. It is not all hardship, it cannot be. No one could bear that, and the medieval world has its joys, woven through the hard year, and they are the brighter for the darkness around them. The festivals are the great release. The year is studded with them, the holy days of the church that are also, and more importantly to you, the holidays, the days when the work stops, when the Lord's demands are suspended, when the whole village gathers to eat and drink and dance and forget for a few hours the grinding labor of every other day. There are many of them scattered through the calendar, far more days of rest than your grim picture of medieval life might suggest. The great feasts of Christmas and Easter and Whitsun, the days of the local saints, the festivals that mark the turning of the agricultural year. And on each of them the village becomes briefly a different place. There is ale, brewed strong for the occasion, the church ales where the parish brews and sells to raise money, and the whole village drinks together. There is food, real food, more and better than the daily pottage. Meat roasted, white bread baked, the slaughtered animal shared out, a feast carved from the lean year by the simple decision that today, this once, there will be plenty. There is music, the pipe and the drum and the fiddle, the songs everyone knows, passed down and sung together. And there is dancing, the whole village on the green, the circle dances and the line dances, the young people pairing off, the courting that the festivals make possible, the rare chance for the boys and girls of the village to meet and look and choose under the eyes of the whole community. The festival is when life is truly lived, when the body that labors all year is allowed to feast and rest and celebrate, and the medieval peasant throws himself into it with an intensity that the hardness of ordinary life makes entirely understandable. There are the rough sports and games, violent and joyful, the wrestling, the contests of strength, the football that is nothing like the ordered game you know, but a wild melee between whole villages, a mob of men driving a ball across the fields and through the streets toward distant goals, with broken bones and bloody noses, the ordinary price of the day's sport. There is archery, which the law in some lands requires the men to practice, the butts where the village gathers to shoot, the skill that makes the common bowman a power on the battlefield, honed in the holiday competition. There is baiting, and there are the rougher amusements that a gentler age would not stomach. The cruelty to animals that is simply part of the entertainment here, no one thinking it strange. The games are hard, as everything here is hard, but they are play, real play, the body and the spirit let loose, and the festival days ring with them. There are the great fairs, larger than the markets, drawing people and goods and entertainers from across the region. The merchants with their exotic wares, but also the players and the minstrels and the tumblers and the jugglers. The traveling entertainers who move from fair to fair, the nearest thing this world has to the spectacle and wonder that you take for granted. The traveling players perform the old stories, the mystery plays that the towns mount on the great feast days. The whole of sacred history from creation to judgment played out on wagons in the streets. The trade guilds each taking their part, a spectacle that draws the whole region, and that is entertainment and instruction and devotion all at once. To see the players, to hear the minstrels sing the old tales of heroes and battles and love, to watch the tumbler and the juggler do their impossible tricks. This is wonder, real wonder, in a life that has little enough of it. And it is remembered and talked of for months after. And there are the small joys, the daily ones, that no festival is needed for. There is the company of the village, the gossip and the talk, the long evenings by the fire telling the old stories, the songs sung at work to lighten it. There is the ale shared with a friend. There is the satisfaction of work well done, the harvest safely in, the pig fattened, the child grown strong. There is love, love between husband and wife, fierce and real for all that the marriage was half a matter of land. Love of parents for children, the more precious for how easily children are lost. The friendships of a lifetime spent among the same few hundred people, known utterly for good and ill. There is the beauty of the land itself, the green of the spring and the gold of the harvest, the changing of the seasons that is hardship, but also a kind of music, the deep belonging of a people rooted in one place for generations beyond counting. The medieval peasant is not a creature of unbroken misery. He laughs, he loves, he sings, he plays, he feasts when he can, and finds his joys where they grow. It is a hard life, harder than you can easily imagine. But it is a life, a full human life, with all that the word contains, and the people who lived it were as alive as you are. And they found, in the cracks of all that hardness, the same things that make any life worth living. Then one year the dying begins, and it does not stop, and it is unlike anything that has ever come before. It comes from the east, carried along the trade routes, though you do not know this. You could not. It comes into the ports on the ships, in the rats and the fleas that the rats carry, though you do not know this either. It comes as rumor first, terrible stories from far-off places, whole cities emptied, the dead beyond counting, and the rumor seems too vast to be true. Then it is at the next town. Then it is in your village. Then it is in your house. They call it the Great Mortality. The thing later ages will name the Black Death. It moves through the land in the middle of the 14th century like the wrath of God, and in the space of a few years it kills perhaps a third of all the people in Europe, perhaps more in places, perhaps half, whole villages wiped from the earth entirely, the survivors too few to bury the dead. There has been nothing like it in living memory or in any memory. It is a catastrophe beyond the scale of anything your world is built to comprehend, and it falls on a population already worn thin by hunger and hardship, and it is merciless. The disease itself is a horror. It comes in forms, and the most common begins with the swellings, the buboes, hard and agonizing, rising in the groin and the armpits and the neck, swelling to the size of an egg, of an apple, black, swollen, and suppurating. Then the fever, the delirium, the dark blotches spreading beneath the skin that give the pestilence its later name. Most who show the signs are dead within days, sometimes within hours, the body overwhelmed with a speed that is itself part of the terror. There is a second form that settles in the lungs and spreads from breath to breath, person to person, killing even faster, and almost no one survives it. The sick die in agony and in filth, and the smell of the dying is everywhere, and the bells toll for the dead until there is no one left to toll them. No one knows what causes it. The learned physicians blame the alignment of the planets, a corruption of the air, a miasma, a poisonous vapor hanging over the land. They advise fleeing to cleaner air, carrying sweet-smelling herbs and flowers to ward off the bad air, lighting fires to purify it. None of it works because none of it touches the true cause, the bacterium in the blood of the fleas on the rats, invisible and unimaginable to this world. Some blame God's anger at the sins of humanity, and this at least fits the scale of the thing, a punishment vast enough to match the crime of a fallen world. and some, in their terror and their need for someone to blame, turn on their neighbors, on the lepers, on the outcasts, and above all, in a horror that stains the age, on the Jews. They are accused of poisoning the wells. They are massacred in their thousands across Europe by mobs maddened with fear and grief. It is a slaughter built on a lie, born from the desperate human need to find a hand behind the disaster, a face to hate, a cause that can be fought, because the true cause cannot. You watch it take your village. You watch the swellings rise on people you have known your whole life. You watch the priest who must go to the dying to give the last rites, sicken and die himself, so that people begin to die unshriven, unconfessed, facing the judgment unprepared, which to the medieval mind is a horror layered on top of the horror, the soul imperiled along with the body. You watch families wiped out entirely, the doors of their huts standing open, the animals wandering untended. You watch the great pits dug at the edge of the churchyard when the individual graves can no longer keep pace, the bodies laid in together, layer upon layer, the old rituals of death abandoned because there is no time and no one left to perform them. And you wait to see if it will take you. There is nothing else to do. You cannot fight it, cannot flee it, cannot understand it. You can pray. The processions of the faithful wind through the dying towns, begging God's mercy. The flagellants appear, bands of penitents who march from town to town, whipping themselves bloody in public, trying to take on the punishment of the world's sins in their own flesh, to turn aside God's wrath through their suffering. It does not work. Nothing works. The pestilence runs its course in its own time, by its own logic, and then it fades, not gone, never quite gone, returning again and again over the years and the decades, but the first great wave passing, leaving behind a world transformed. The strangeness of living through it is hard to convey. The world does not end all at once. It ends a little at a time, and you go on living in the ruins of it. The market still must be held, or at least some of it. The animals still must be fed, the survivors still must eat. And so even in the worst of the dying, there is the surreal continuation of ordinary life alongside the horror, the living going about their reduced business among the dead. Whole trades vanish as their practitioners die. The fields go untended because there is no one to tend them, the ripe grain rotting where it stands, the animals wandering loose. And then, in the strange aftermath, the few who remain inherit more than they ever dreamed. The lands of the dead, the good of the dead, the holdings left empty, falling to whoever is left alive to claim them. There are those who emerge from the plague poor, and those who emerge from it by the grim arithmetic of inheritance, suddenly and uneasily rich, holding the property of a dozen dead relatives alone. And the faith itself is shaken. The plague falls on the devout and the wicked alike, on the priest at the altar and the sinner in the tavern, with no visible distinction, and this is hard to reconcile with a just God who watches over his creation. Some are driven deeper into faith, to ever more desperate devotion, the processions and the penances and the flagellants whipping themselves through the streets. But some are driven the other way, into a kind of reckless despair or a hard new cynicism. If death comes for all regardless, then why not eat, drink, and take whatever pleasure can be had before it comes? And there are those who turn to exactly this, a frantic embrace of the moment in the face of the universal dying. and the authority of the church, which could not explain the plague and could not stop it, and whose priests died like everyone else, is quietly weakened. A crack opened that will widen in the centuries to come, the first loosening of the total grip of the faith on the medieval mind. Because the world that survives the Black Death is not the world that entered it. So many are dead that the survivors find themselves suddenly valuable in a way peasants have never been valuable before. The lords who need their fields worked find that there are not enough hands, and that the hands that remain can demand more pay, more freedom, an end to the old bonds of serfdom that tied them to the land. The lords resist, pass laws to hold wages down, to bind the peasants in place, but the arithmetic of the plague is against them. There are too few workers and too much work, and the price of labor rises despite every law, and the great structure of serfdom, the fixed and frozen order that has held for centuries, begins slowly to crack. When the peasants rise in revolt in the decades that follow, marching on the great cities, demanding an end to bondage, it is the plague, in a sense, that has armed them, the plague that has shown that the old order is not eternal, that the world can change, that even death on this unimaginable scale can clear the ground for something new. But that is later. That is the broad sweep of history. It means nothing to you in the moment, in the village, in the year of the dying. To you there is only the fear and the bells and the swellings rising on the bodies of the people you love, and the pits at the edge of the churchyard, and the long, helpless waiting to learn whether you will live or die. You did not choose to be here for this, but here you are in the worst year the world has ever known, and all you can do is endure it, or not, as the pestilence decides. The nights are not what the stories tell you. You have grown up with the songs and the tales, the gallant warriors, the code of honor, the protection of the weak, the great deeds of chivalry. There is something to it, a thin layer of truth. There is a code. The knights do hold an ideal of themselves as honorable, devout, courageous, courteous to ladies, and merciful to the fallen. But the ideal and the reality are far apart. And the reality for a peasant like you is mostly this. A knight is a man trained from childhood to kill, armored and mounted, and armed in ways you could never match. And when the violence comes, it is people like you who suffer most. War in the medieval world is constant. Not always the great wars of king against king, though those come too, grinding on for years, for generations, but the smaller, endless violence of lord against lord, the feuds and the raids and the disputes settled with steel. And war here does not mean two armies meeting on a field while the countryside looks on. War means the army moving through the land, and an army must eat, and it eats the countryside, your crops, your animals, your stores. The strategy of medieval war is often precisely this: to ride into the enemy lord's lands and burn and pillage and destroy, to wreck his peasants and his harvests because his power rests on them, and to ruin them is to ruin him. The great raids, the chevauchées, are campaigns of deliberate devastation, and the villages in their path are burned, the people killed or scattered, the work of years undone in an afternoon. You are not a participant in the war. You are its fuel and its victim, the thing that is consumed. When the soldiers come, there is little you can do. You may flee if there is warning, taking what you can carry into the forest or behind the walls of the nearest town or castle, if it will have you. You may hide your grain, bury it, drive your animals into the woods. But if the soldiers find you, your life is worth very little to them. They will take your food, your animals, anything of value. They may burn your hut for sport, or simply to deny it to the enemy. The violence done to peasant women by passing soldiers is a horror that the songs of chivalry do not sing, and it is common, and there is no justice for it, because who can the powerless appeal to against the armed men of a lord? The knight's mercy and courtesy, such as they are owed to other knights, to those of his own rank, who can be ransomed and exchanged and treated according to the code. They are not owed to you. To the men of war, you are scarcely more than the animals they drive off, and your suffering scarcely registers. The fighting itself, when armies meet, is a thing of mud and blood and chaos that bears no resemblance to the clean clash of the tales. The knights on their great horses are the heart of an army, armored head to foot, terrifyingly effective against those who cannot match them. But the wars of this age are slowly teaching that even the knight can be brought down. The masked archers, the long bowmen, can darken the sky with arrows and bring down horse and rider together. The cheap arrow of a common man can kill the expensive knight, and the great battles where this happens send a tremor through the whole order of society. Because if the peasant with a bow can kill the noble in his armor, what then becomes of the natural order, the three estates, the fighters set above the workers by God's design? The pike, the polearm, the press of common infantry, these too are beginning to stand against the mounted knight, and the age of the knight's absolute dominance is, though no one quite sees it yet, beginning its slow end. But the dying on the battlefield, knight and commoner alike, is hideous. There is no clean death here, no quick mercy. There are wounds that kill slowly, men bleeding out in the mud, or dying days later of the infection that follows almost every wound that does not kill outright. The surgeons of the army do what they can, which is little. They can sometimes remove an arrowhead, set a bone, cauterize a wound with hot iron or boiling oil, amputate a shattered limb without anything to dull the agony, but drink and the grip of strong men holding you down. Many of their patients die of the treatment or of the rot that sets in after. To be wounded in a medieval battle is, more often than not, to be sentenced to a slow and filthy death, and the field after a battle is a place of horror, the wounded crying out among the dead, the scavengers moving among them, stripping the corpses of armor and weapons and clothing and boots, the ravens already gathering. The castle is the other face of medieval war, and you may, in your life, see one, the great stone stronghold of a powerful lord, rising over the land, a thing built to dominate and to endure. The castle is a machine of war, designed to be defended by few against many, with its walls and its towers and its gate, its arrow slits and its murder holes, its supplies laid in for a siege. And the siege is the great set piece of medieval war, the army gathered around the walls, trying to break in or to starve the defenders out, the defenders trying to hold until relief comes or the besiegers give up. Sieges can last months, even years, and they are won as often by hunger and disease as by assault. The besieging army camped in its own filth, sickening, the besieged within the walls eating through their stores and then their horses, and then worse, both sides locked in a contest of endurance and misery. If the walls are breached, If the town or the castle is taken by storm after refusing to surrender, the custom of war permits the sack. The soldiers are loosed on the place to kill, burn, and plunder as they will. It is a horror visited on defender and civilian alike, the price of resistance, and a deliberate terror meant to teach the next town to open its gates. The making of a knight belongs to a world far above your own, and worth understanding because it shapes the men who rule you. The noble boy is taken from his mother young, sent to another lord's household to serve as a page, learning manners and service and the beginnings of arms. He becomes a squire, attending a knight, caring for the horses and the armor, following his master to war, learning the trade of killing at his side. And if he proves himself, he is dubbed a knight in his turn, in a ceremony heavy with religious meaning, the sword blessed, the vigil kept, the young man swearing to defend the church and the weak, and to live by the code. The horse alone that carries him is worth more than your whole village will see in a lifetime, the armor more still, the years of training a luxury that only the land worked by men like you can pay for. Everything the knight is, every hour of his training and every piece of his costly gear, rests on the labor of the peasants whose crops feed him and whose rents arm him. He is the sharp end of a great pyramid of toil, and the toil is yours, and the sharp end is pointed more often than not at someone very like you. And the strange thing, the thing hardest to hold in the mind, is that these same men can be, in their own setting and by their own lights, genuinely devout, genuinely bound by their code, capable of real courage and real generosity and real tenderness toward their own. The knight who burns a village without a thought may weep at Mass, may keep faith with his Lord unto death, may treat a captured equal with perfect courtesy. The cruelty and the chivalry are not opposites to him. They are two faces of the same world, one owed to those within the circle of honor, the other dealt to those outside it. And you, the peasant, are outside it, always and entirely outside it. That is the whole of what you need to know about the men on horseback when you see them on the road. This is the violence that hangs over your world, the violence of the men whose entire purpose is violence, who are bred and trained and armed for it, and who hold the highest places in your society precisely because of it. The Lord protects you from other lords, yes, that is his side of the bargain, but the protection is from a danger that he and his kind are themselves the source of. The whole apparatus of medieval war exists because medieval lords cannot stop fighting one another, and you, the peasant, the worker, the one who feeds them all, are caught forever in the middle of it, your crops their plunder, your village their battlefield, your body beneath their notice. The age of chivalry, seen from the bottom, from the mud, from the burning hut and the trampled field, looks very different than it does in the songs. And over all of it, every year, comes winter. You have been preparing for it since the spring. Everything you do, in a sense, is preparation for winter. The crops are grown and stored, the hay is cut and dried, the wood is gathered, the pig is fattened, slaughtered, and salted. The whole long labor of the warm months is bent toward one goal, having enough laid by to survive the cold months. When nothing grows, the land gives nothing, and the only food is the food you have saved. The winter is the test that the whole year has been building toward, and it is a test that in a bad year you can fail. And to fail it is to die. The cold comes first, then the dark. The days shorten until there is barely light to work by, the sun low and weak, rising late and setting early, and the long nights press in, 16 hours of darkness, 18 the world shrunk to the small red circle of the fire. There is no light except fire, the hearth, a rush dipped in fat that burns with a small flame and a foul smoke, a tallow candle, if you are fortunate, the wax candle, a luxury of the church and the wealthy. You go to sleep when the dark comes because there is little else to do in it, and you rise in the dark, and the great stretch of the winter night is a thing you spend mostly asleep or huddled by the fire, telling the old stories, mending what can be mended by firelight, waiting for the light to come back. The cold is relentless, inescapable. Your hut, never warm, is now bitter, the fire holding back only the worst of it, the warmth not reaching the corners, the damp turned to frost on the inside of the walls on the hardest mornings. You sleep in your clothes, under every covering you have, pressed together with your family and your animals for the shared warmth of bodies. You wake stiff with cold, your hands crack and bleed. The very old and the very young are most at risk. The cold takes them, the chest sickness settling into weak lungs, the frail simply failing in the night and found cold in the morning. Winter is the season of death for the old, as summer is for the young, and between the two, the village is always burying someone. And the great fear of winter is hunger, because winter is when the stores must last. If the harvest was poor, they do not last. You ration from the first, eyeing the grain in the bin, the salted pork hanging in the smoke, calculating whether it will reach the spring. In a good year it does, barely. In a bad year, a year when the harvest failed, when the rains came at the wrong time and rotted the grain in the field, when the crops were burned by an army or eaten by a blight. The stores run out before the winter ends, and then comes the famine. The true famine, the hungry gap stretched into something far worse. You eat the seed grain that should have gone into the spring planting, which means hunger now and catastrophe later. You eat the animals you cannot feed. You eat things that are not food, the bark, the roots, the grass when it comes, the bran and the chaff. You watch the children grow thin and listless, their bellies swollen, their eyes large in their shrunken faces. And people die. In the great famines, they die in numbers that empty whole regions, the weak first and then the strong, the desperate taking to the roads in search of food that is not there, the order of society breaking down under the simple absolute pressure of nothing to eat. The medieval world lives always one bad harvest away from this. There is no reserve, no system to draw on, no relief that can be summoned from afar. If your region starves, the next region is likely starving too, the bad weather that ruined your crop having ruined theirs, and there is no way to move food at the scale that would be needed, even if it existed somewhere. The famine is local and total. It falls on a whole land at once, and there is no escaping it. And the only defense against it is the slim margin of the stored harvest, which the winter is always trying to exhaust before the spring can come. And so you wait. The whole of winter is a waiting. Waiting for the cold to break, for the days to lengthen, for the first signs of the spring that means survival. You watch the sky and the land for the turning. You mark the feasts of the church that are scattered through the dark season. The great festival of Christmas falls at the very depth of winter, a defiant blaze of warmth, food, and light against the dark. The slaughtered animals provide a brief feast. The community gathers. The songs are sung. A few days of plenty and joy are carved out of the heart of the hard season, precisely because the season is so hard. The midwinter festival is old, far older than the church that now keeps it. The human need to make a fire and a feast at the darkest point of the year, to insist on life when the world seems most dead, and you keep it as your ancestors kept it, for reasons deeper than you could name. Then slowly the turning comes. The days lengthen, a few minutes at a time. The cold loses its edge, then breaks. The first green appears, the first new growth, and with it the first food the land has given in months, and the hungry gap, if you have survived it, begins at last to close. The animals are turned out to the new grass. The plowing begins again, the seed goes into the ground, the whole great cycle starts once more, the same cycle without beginning or end. The turning of the seasons, that is the deepest rhythm of your life and the life of everyone who has ever lived here. You have survived another winter. Not everyone has. There are empty places at the fire, fresh graves in the churchyard, the marks of the season that the cold and the hunger always leave. But you are alive, and the spring has come, and there is work to do, and that, in the end, is the whole of it, to survive and to work, and to survive again, season after season, year after year, for as long as the body holds out. This is the medieval world, not the castles and the banners, not the knights and the fair ladies, not the chivalry of the songs. This is the truth, the cold hut, the gray pottage, the endless labor, the filth and the fear, the Lord above and the grave below, the long dark winter and the slow turning of the year. This is where you were born tonight, and where you have lived this single day, and where, if this were your true life, you would die, young by the measure of your own age and ancient by the measure of mine. But it is not your true life. You are only visiting. And now the day is done, and the winter night has come, and the fire is burning low, and there is nothing left to do but lie down in the straw and let the dark take you. So let it. Let the cold and the smoke and the hardness of it all fade away. You do not have to wake to this. The morning that comes for you will be a warmer one, in a softer world, 700 years from here. But for tonight, lie still. Listen to the wind in the thatch. Feel the warmth of the dying fire. And sleep the way they slept, because the day was long and the body is tired, and tomorrow, whatever it brings, will come whether you are ready for it or not. Close your eyes. The Middle Ages are letting you go.